Outwardly, Gerard and Allison Baden-Clay seemed like the perfect loving couple. But behind closed doors, things were very different. Allison's close friends even warned her to leave her husband. Then one day, the woman suddenly vanished without a trace. Allison, née Dickey, was born on July 1, 1968, in a suburb of Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. She grew up in a well-off, complete family. From a young age, the girl was passionate about ballet and devoted much time to it. Allison successfully finished school and later earned a university degree. She was always among the top students and spoke 6 languages fluently. At the age of 25, in 1993, the charming Allison won a local beauty pageant. The jury was particularly impressed by her ballet dance. Shortly after graduating from university, she got a job at the Brisbane company, Afflaid Centre, in the HR department. Allison quickly climbed the career ladder, and her supervisor spoke of her as a talented, smart, and promising employee. It was at work that fate brought Allison together with her future husband, Gerard. He was born on September 9, 1970, in the British town of Bournemouth. Interestingly, Gerard's great-grandfather, Robert Baden-Powell, was a famous military leader and founder of the Scouting movement in Great Britain. When the boy turned 1, his family moved to Zambia, the homeland of Gerard's father, Nigel Clay. They lived there for 8 years and then decided to immigrate to Australia. Gerard finished school, qualified as an accountant, and started working at the Afflaid Centre. That's where he met his future wife, Allison. Romantic feelings immediately sparked between the young people. And on August 23, 1997, the couple got married. After celebrating the wedding, the newlyweds went on a small trip around the world. They visited South America, Switzerland, and spent several weeks in London. Upon returning home to Australia, Allison continued working at the Afflaid Centre. Within a few years, she held a managerial position there. In 2002, she became pregnant, and 9 months later, the couple had a long-awaited baby girl, Hannah. Allison quit her job to fully dedicate herself to family and caring for little Hannah. Meanwhile, Gerard changed jobs several times. In 2004, he opened his own prestigious real estate agency in Brisbane, having purchased a franchise. Gerard gave jobs to his parents at this agency, and they helped him run the firm. Gerard was an energetic, sociable, and self-confident man. He liked being the center of attention. He spent almost all his time at work. That same year, 2004, a second girl, Sarah, was born into the Baden-Clay family. And 3 years later, in 2007, Allison gave birth to their third daughter, whom they named Ella. At that time, the family was renting a house in Brookfield, a rural suburb of Brisbane. Allison took care of the children and rarely left home. But after some time, she noticed that Gerard began to distance himself from her. One day, he even confessed that he no longer loved her. Gerard started nitpicking at his wife over the smallest things, either she didn't season a dish well or didn't have time to clean up. He could call Allison lazy and say she no longer attracted him as a woman. Allison endured it all in silence. The woman kept a personal diary. In it, she wrote about her love for her husband and the frequent quarrels in the family. Allison believed that she was to blame for everything. She was convinced that if she corrected her mistakes, her husband would love her again. Allison hid her inner turmoil and problems in family life behind a smile. She was always a friendly, gentle woman, a caring mother, and a devoted wife. In 2011, after a series of devastating floods in Queensland, Gerard's real estate agency found itself in a difficult situation. To avoid losing the business, the man had to borrow large sums of money. The debts amounted to nearly $1 million Australian dollars. And in October of the same year, Allison accidentally found out that Gerard had long been cheating on her with his employee Toni McHugh. Gerard and Toni met back in 2008. At first, Toni was a client of Gerard's agency, and then he hired her. At that time, The woman had already been married for 17 years and was raising children, but her relationship with her husband was not going well. Having started a passionate affair with Gerard, Toni divorced her husband. Toni knew that Gerard was married, but he assured his mistress that he and his wife were just friends. Allegedly, there had been no intimacy between them for a long time, and he was living with Allison only for the sake of their daughters. Gerard promised Toni that they would definitely be together soon and that he would marry her. But almost 4 years passed, and the man still did not dare to leave his family. When Allison discovered the marital infidelity in October 2011, Gerard promised Toni that he would divorce her. He broke off relations with his mistress and fired her from the agency. Gerard mended his relationship with Allison and begged his wife for forgiveness. She forgave him. But just a couple of months later, in January 2012, the man again invited Toni out on a date to a cafe. Gerard came to the meeting without his wedding ring. He once again professed his love to Toni, telling her how hard it was for him without her. He promised that in 6 months, he would definitely file for divorce. The woman believed her lover and hoped for a happy resolution to their secret relationship. Another 4 months passed. On the evening of Thursday, April 19, 2012, Toni was driving home from work. On the way, she called Gerard. It was an ordinary conversation. They were discussing an upcoming real estate conference. Suddenly, the man informed her that the next day at the event, Toni would have to meet his wife, Allison. This news struck Toni unpleasantly. She began questioning Gerard about why he hadn't told her about this earlier, why he had been silent for so long. The angry woman shouted that the man had been deceiving her all along. Toni doubted whether they should continue their relationship at all. Gerard apologized, once again swore his feelings to his mistress, and promised that in 3 months, he would finally divorce. He said he would definitely leave Allison, even though she had mental health problems. Gerard began apologizing and assuring Toni of his feelings. He promised that the divorce process would be completed in just 3 months. The man insisted that he would definitely leave Allison, even though he knew about her mental health problems. The next morning, on Friday, April 20th, at 7:14 a.m., an agitated Gerard called the police. He reported that the previous evening, around 10 o'clock, his wife Allison had gone for a walk and still had not returned home. Soon, a police patrol arrived at the Baden-Clay family's house. First of all, the officers were alerted by the deep, jagged cuts on Gerard's face. He explained that he had simply cut himself while shaving. At the request of the police, the man undressed so that his bodily injuries could be photographed. On Gerard's chest, law enforcement officers noticed numerous small red dots. According to him, the previous evening, when he was changing a light bulb in the yard, some caterpillar had bitten him. During the house inspection, the officers found no suspicious traces. The dwelling was clean and tidy, the beds were made. Gerard, meanwhile, calmly got his daughters ready for school and kindergarten. The police talked to the girls, 10-year-old Hannah, 8-year-old Sarah, and 5-year-old Ella. The children said that the previous evening, they had fallen asleep to their mother's lullaby. Then Allison turned off the light, left the room, and they never saw her again. While talking to the officers, the girls could not hold back their tears. They said their parents had always tried to be good and cheerful. Law enforcement thoroughly inspected the area around the house and questioned the neighbors, hoping to get at least some lead about the missing Allison. But no witness had seen or heard anything. The only thing the investigators managed to find then was a few drops of blood in the woman's car and a strand of her hair in the trunk. Subsequently, the scale of the search for the missing woman expanded significantly. Rescuers, search groups, and volunteers came to the aid of the police. They combed the surrounding forests, checked wells, abandoned mines, and dams. Near the Baden-Clay house, they even set up a mannequin in women's clothing to recreate Allison's appearance in the last minutes before her disappearance. But the longer the search lasted, the less hope remained for the family to find the woman alive. Close friends of the family prayed incessantly, not wanting to even assume the worst. Gerard, overcome with grief, alternated between giving interviews to journalists and expressing hope for his wife's quick return home. At the same time, he contacted his mistress Toni, insisting that they should stop all communication for a while, to lay low. Meanwhile, Gerard continued to profess his love to the woman, assuring her that they would be together soon. 10 days had passed since Allison's disappearance. On April 30, 2012, a man, sailing in a boat, noticed a mutilated body on the riverbank. The gruesome discovery was made 13 kilometers from the Baden-Clay estate, under the Colo Bridge. And the very next day, Gerard went to the insurance company to find out what documents he needed to fill out in order to receive payment under his wife's policy. At the time of her disappearance, Allison's life was insured for $800,000 Australian dollars. A few more days passed. The medical examiner established that the mutilated corpse found under the bridge belonged to 43-year-old Allison Baden-Clay, who had disappeared 10 days earlier. Due to the advanced decomposition of the body, the exact cause of the woman's death could not be determined. She was wearing the same clothes she had left the house in, only her sweater was pulled up. Allison could only be identified thanks to dental records. Criminalists suggested that the woman had been strangled and classified her death as a murder. The funeral of Allison Baden-Clay took place on May 11, 2012, at St. Paul's Church. Gerard, in tears, comforted his daughters and supported the deceased's parents. Hundreds of people came to say goodbye to Allison. At the same time, Gerard continued to maintain contact with his mistress Toni, periodically calling her from a street payphone. He told the woman that something terrible had happened to his wife and asked her not to tell anyone about their secret relationship. Meanwhile, an intensive investigation into the murder of Allison Baden-Clay began. Her husband became the main suspect. Gerard maintained his position. Allegedly, at 10 in the evening, his wife had gone for her usual evening walk, and he had gone to bed. In the morning, when he woke up, he discovered that Allison had not returned home. However, the investigators uncovered interesting details. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Gerard put his phone on charge, and at 5 in the morning, he was sitting at the computer, searching the internet for information about the right to remain silent. The medical examiner concluded that the scratches on the suspect's right cheek did not resemble shaving cuts but rather looked like marks from long female fingernails. At the same time, not a single drop of blood was found on Gerard's razor. As for the injuries on his chest, according to a biologist, there were no caterpillars capable of biting a person so abundantly in the area where the Baden-Clays lived. A botanist expert found fragments of 5 different plant species in the hair of the deceased Allison: eucalyptus, Chinese elm, myrtle, as well as leaves and thorns of the cat's claw vine and fishtail fern. Trees of the first 2 species, eucalyptus and Chinese elm, grew right under the bridge where the woman's mutilated body was found. Leaves and thorns of all 5 mentioned plant species were also found in the backyard of the Baden-Clay family's house. A month after the funeral, on June 13, 2012, 41-year-old Gerard Baden-Clay was officially charged with his wife's murder. The suspect was taken into custody. Gerard denied his guilt and intended to defend himself to the end. He asked to be released on bail but was immediately refused. The police feared that the man would flee. When, during the interrogation, the investigators called Toni and asked about the nature of her relationship with Gerard, the woman told the truth: their secret affair had been going on for 4 years already. And a few days before Allison's disappearance, the man had sent his mistress a letter in which he promised that they would be together by July 1. The trial in the case of Allison Baden-Clay's death began in June 2014. The prosecution insisted that Gerard had killed his wife for the sake of an insurance payout, which would help him pay off his debts and start a new life with his mistress Toni McHugh. The prosecutor outlined his version of the events that could have occurred on the night of April 19 to 20, 2012. At 10 in the evening, Allison put her daughters to bed, after which she joined her husband in the living room. Together they watched television. At some point, a heated argument broke out between the spouses, during which Gerard attacked Allison with his fists, and the woman scratched his face. Forensic experts found someone's DNA under the nails of the deceased's left hand, but due to the significant damage to the biomaterial, they could not establish the person from whom it originated. The prosecutor argued that during the fight, Gerard strangled his wife and then dragged her lifeless body through the backyard. That's where leaves and thorns of local plants got tangled in the victim's hair. Later, the man shoved the dead Allison into the trunk of the car, took her to the river, and threw her under the bridge. The suspect allegedly hoped that after some time, the water level would rise, and the current would carry the body away in an unknown direction, then no one would ever find Allison. After committing the crime, Gerard returned to his home and put his phone on charge at 1:48 a.m. He cleaned up the house, and in the morning, he called the police and reported his wife missing. That same day, the suspect began looking for a lawyer specializing in criminal cases. And when Allison's body was found, before the official identification, he had already managed to visit the office of his new defense attorney. During the trial, Gerard continued to deny his guilt. He insisted that he would never leave his 3 little daughters home alone. He admitted that he had indeed had an argument with Allison that evening. According to the suspect, his offended wife ran away from home late in the evening. The man knew that the woman suffered from depression, so he thought, at the fatal moment, she had decided to end her life. However, Allison's parents and friends rejected such a possibility. They were convinced that she would never have resorted to suicide because she loved her girls above all else and took care of them. Her friends said they immediately suspected something was wrong because Gerard had always behaved too arrogantly and insincerely, considering himself superior to others. But Allison herself, due to her great love for her husband, did not notice his flaws. At the trial, excerpts from Allison's personal diary were made public. The woman wrote that the relationship with her husband had changed after the birth of their firstborn. Since then, she had felt lonely and almost never left the house. Gerard constantly controlled and humiliated her, forbade her to go outside, and could say something very cruel during arguments. He even eavesdropped on his wife's conversations through the baby monitor. He monitored Allison's expenses, deleted the numbers of her relatives from the contact list, and blocked their calls to the home phone. The woman's death prompted Gerard to try to obtain a substantial payout under the insurance policy. However, the company refused, freezing the money until a court decision was made. Another witness in the case, Melissa Romana, said that she had never met Gerard in person but had spoken with him several times by phone in 2009 regarding a real estate deal. When the deal was concluded, Gerard called the woman again. In a very serious voice, he said, "I have an interesting proposition for you. I need someone who would kill my wife." These words shocked Melissa, so she asked, "Why do you want her dead?" But Gerard did not answer. He abruptly changed the subject of the conversation, and soon said goodbye to the woman altogether, as it turned out, forever. On July 15, 2014, the court found Gerard Baden-Clay guilty and sentenced him to life imprisonment. However, there was a possibility of early release after 15 years. The very next year, 2015, the convict appealed the verdict. Then the servants of Themis decided that Allison's murder was not intentional and mitigated the punishment, reducing Gerard's prison term. This decision of the appellate court outraged the Australian public. Soon people took to the streets with protests and calls to overturn the ruling. About 4,000 people gathered to support the family of the deceased Allison. Finally, in 2016, the Supreme Court of Australia annulled the scandalous decision of the appellate instance and returned the original sentence to the murderer Gerard Baden-Clay, life imprisonment. Thus, the man will be able to apply for parole no earlier than 2027. It turned out that during the first year of imprisonment, Gerard behaved like an exemplary prisoner. But later, he began to feel at home behind bars and even committed a disciplinary offense, he allowed himself to grope a guard's buttocks. For this, the prisoner was severely reprimanded. In the correctional facility, Gerard befriended his cellmate, 73-year-old businessman millionaire John Chardon. The elderly man was also serving a sentence for the unintentional killing of his own wife. In addition, Gerard became friends with the Italian Massimo Sicca, who was convicted of a triple murder. The victims were his girlfriend, as well as her brother and sister. As for Gerard's former mistress, Toni McHugh, immediately after the end of the trial, she moved to the Indonesian island of Bali. There, the woman taught English and engaged in charity work. For years passed, and Toni relocated to the UAE, where she worked as a teacher again. Now, the former mistress of the convicted murderer lives very modestly and tries not to disclose information about her family. Keeping in touch with friends, she periodically logs into social networks from an anonymous account. Toni fears that Gerard will find her as soon as he is released. In her latest interview with journalists, the woman admitted that she had never wished Allison any harm and bitterly regrets everything that happened. From Toni, the public learned that Gerard had cheated on his wife not only with her but also with other women. The three orphan daughters of the deceased Allison, Hannah, Sarah, and Ella, were raised in the family of her parents and still live with their grandmother and grandfather. It is known that all the property of the tragically deceased mother, as well as the insurance payments received later, were transferred to the children. As of 2022, the eldest of the sisters, Hannah Baden-Clay, had already graduated from university. Like her late mother, the girl is passionate about dancing and pursues it professionally. Meanwhile, Allison's sister Vanessa founded a charitable organization aimed at combating domestic. Thank you for watching this story. Write your thoughts about it in the comments. Don't miss the future videos, subscribe and like the channel. Take care of yourself and people you love.